The first time I realized I wasn't alone in my own bedroom, I laughed. It was the kind of laugh you give when you're 2 seconds away from crying but refuse to let the dam break. My life had already been a mess, so why not add a ghost to the list? The diary wasn't supposed to be anything more than a stupid thrift store find. A leather-bound book with yellowed pages and handwriting that slanted like someone always running out of time. I bought it for $3, shoved it under my bed, and forgot about it. But grief makes you do insane things, and one night, drunk on loneliness and whiskey, I whispered to the pages like they were scripture. I asked for comfort. I asked for someone to make the silence bearable. And then he answered. At first, it was only the flicker of light in the corner of my room. Then the sound of boots creaking across wooden floorboards when no one else was home. Finally, a voice, low, steady, and heartbreakingly kind, slipped into the cracks of my broken nights. He told me his name was Daniel. He told me he had once lived, loved, and lost more than I could ever imagine. And somehow, impossibly, he told me that now he was mine to summon. I should have been terrified. I should have burned the diary and run. But instead, I sat there with my knees pulled to my chest, whispering back to the darkness. "Why me?" I asked. His answer was a soft, tragic smile that lingered in the air like smoke. "Because you called." Daniel wasn't like the ghosts you see in movies. He wasn't chains and moaning or grotesque tricks of the eye. He looked as real as anyone else, except sometimes, in certain angles of light, I could see right through him. His hair fell into his eyes like every boy in old Polaroids. His voice carried an accent that belonged to another time, another America, one where boys like us didn't dare say out loud what burned in their chests. I didn't mean for it to happen, but late nights turned into conversations that stitched the torn fabric of my days. I told him about my father who hadn't looked at me the same since I came out, about my mother's silence, sharper than any insult, about the way my friends drifted away after I stopped pretending to be the version of myself they wanted. Daniel listened, and then, slowly, he began to tell me his own story. He had been alive in the 1960s, a time where boys like him lived in shadows. He spoke of dances he could never attend with the boy he loved, of letters burned before they could be sent, of a world that crushed softness into silence. He had loved someone once, deeply, fully, recklessly, but that love had ended with betrayal, and betrayal had ended with blood. He never told me the full story, not right away, but the grief in his voice was thick enough to choke me. And still, against reason, against sanity, I found myself falling. Falling for the way he laughed like it was stolen. Falling for the way his eyes softened whenever he looked at me, like I was the first person in decades to see him, really see him. There were nights I forgot he was dead. Nights where his hand hovered just close enough to mine that I swore I could feel warmth. Nights where I wondered if loneliness had finally carved me hollow, leaving just enough space for a ghost to take root. But love, real love, is never safe. The first time I tried to introduce Daniel to the world outside my room, he disappeared. 1 second he was standing beside me in the kitchen, curious about the glow of the refrigerator light. The next, gone. My mother's voice called from the living room, sharp and cold as ever, and I felt the echo of him retreat back into the shadows of the diary. I couldn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? A boy in a small American town, already carrying the weight of being different, now confessing he was in love with a ghost? It sounded pathetic, tragic. Worse, it sounded exactly like me. But the more I tried to pull away, the stronger he clung to me. Not in a malicious way, not in anger, just in the way someone who's starved for decades will cling to the first taste of sweetness. "Don't shut me out," he whispered one night, when I threatened to burn the diary. "You asked for me, and I answered." His voice cracked, raw and human, and it undid me. I realized then that Daniel wasn't haunting me. I was haunting him, my grief, my loneliness, My desperate need for love had pulled him out of the ashes of memory, and now we were bound together by something neither of us understood. And God help me, I didn't want to let go. Daniel didn't like mirrors. I noticed it the night I caught him in the bathroom, standing in front of the cracked mirror above the sink. His reflection was only half there, fractured and shifting like smoke. His face looked younger somehow, or maybe just unfinished, like the glass couldn't hold the truth of him. When he realized I was watching, he looked down, ashamed. "They don't show me the way I want to be remembered," he said softly. "What way is that?" He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Alive." Something about the way he said it gutted me. I crossed the room and reached out, forgetting for a moment that my hand might meet air instead of skin. But when my fingers hovered near his wrist, I felt it warmth. Faint, fleeting, like the last trace of sun before nightfall, but it was there. "I see you," I whispered. Daniel smiled, small and broken. "That's all I've ever wanted." The nights that followed became our sanctuary. I would close my bedroom door, sit cross-legged on the floor with the diary open between us, and listen to him weave stories of a world long gone. He told me about diners with checkered floors, jukeboxes that played love songs he could never admit were for him, stolen glances across crowded rooms that felt more dangerous than fire. "Did you ever kiss him?" I asked once, unable to hide the curiosity bleeding into my voice. Daniel hesitated, his eyes going distant, as if watching a memory replay in the corner of the room. "Once," he said finally, "behind the old church where no one could see." He tasted like cigarettes and fear. I swallowed hard. "And you loved him?" He nodded. "With everything I had. But loving him cost me everything." I wanted to ask more, to demand the whole truth, but the pain etched into his features stopped me. Some wounds were too deep to drag into the open. Instead, I told him about myself, about the boy I had kissed behind the bleachers when I was 16, thinking it meant something, only to hear him laugh about it with his friends the next day. About the way my father's silence grew louder with every passing year, until it filled every corner of our house. About the way loneliness wasn't just something I felt, but something I wore, like a second skin. Daniel listened like no one else ever had, and slowly, impossibly, the distance between us shrank. One stormy night in late October, I asked him the question that had been clawing at me for weeks. "Why are you still here?" The rain pounded against the window, thunder rolling across the sky like a warning. Daniel sat on the edge of my bed, his outline glowing faintly in the flashes of lightning. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because you called me. Maybe because I never got to finish what I started. Or maybe," he looked at me then, eyes raw and searching, "maybe because I wasn't ready to stop loving." The words lodged in my throat. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. "Loving who?" I managed. His gaze didn't waver. "You." The room tilted. The storm outside roared, but all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. A ghost. A boy dead for decades. And yet, in that moment, he felt more real than anything else in my world. I should have pushed him away. I should have reminded him and myself that what we had was impossible. But instead, I whispered the only truth I had left. "I don't want you to leave." Daniel's hand lifted, trembling, uncertain. For the first time, his fingers brushed mine with enough force to make me shiver. It wasn't solid, not fully, but it was there. And it was enough. "Then I won't," he said. For weeks, we lived in the fragile illusion of normalcy. I'd go to school, endure the whispers and stares that followed me like shadows, and rush home to find him waiting. We'd walk through the empty streets of town late at night, Daniel marveling at how much had changed and how much hadn't. "This place feels smaller," he remarked once. standing in front of the boarded-up movie theater. But maybe that's just because I've been gone too long. I glanced at him, at the way the streetlights passed right through his form, leaving him half illuminated, half lost. Or maybe it's because you're not small anymore, I said. Not to me. He smiled at that, and for a moment he looked less like a ghost and more like a boy who could have sat beside me in math class, passed me notes, made me laugh in the back row. But the illusion never lasted. There were always reminders. The way his presence flickered when I tried to introduce him to light. The way his body seemed to dissolve at the edges when I reached for him too eagerly. The way he disappeared for hours, sometimes days, when I pressed too hard about his past. It was like loving someone made of water, beautiful, essential, but impossible to hold. And still, I couldn't stop. The breaking point came the night my father found the diary. I'd left it open on my desk, stupid and careless, pages covered in my desperate handwriting, conversations with Daniel, confessions I could never say out loud. My father stormed into my room, holding the diary like evidence of a crime. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "It's nothing," I lied, heart slamming in my chest. His eyes narrowed. "Don't you dare lie to me. You've been writing to another boy? Some dead boy." His voice cracked with rage and something uglier. "Do you have any idea how sick this is?" The words cut deeper than he knew. I wanted to scream that it wasn't sick, that it was the only thing keeping me alive. But before I could, Daniel appeared, right there in front of my father. I gasped. He had never shown himself to anyone else before. His form flickered, unstable, but his presence filled the room like a storm. "Leave him alone," Daniel said, his voice low and commanding. My father's face went pale. His eyes darted between me and the impossible figure standing before him. For a moment I thought he might collapse. Then he muttered something about me being insane and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I turned to Daniel, breathless. "Why did you do that?" His expression was fierce, unshakable. "Because he doesn't get to break you. Not anymore." And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just grief or loneliness. This was love, messy, impossible, dangerous love. But love, as I would soon learn, demands a price. The more I clung to Daniel, the weaker he seemed to become. His visits grew shorter, his form fainter. Sometimes he wouldn't show up at all, and I would sit for hours with the diary in my lap, whispering his name like a prayer. Finally, one night, he told me the truth. "I can't stay," he admitted, voice shaking. "Every moment I spend here, with you, it pulls me further away from where I'm supposed to be." Tears burned my eyes. "Where's that? Heaven? Hell? Oblivion?" "I don't know," he said. "All I know is that I was meant to move on, and I didn't. I stayed because of you." "Then stay," I begged. "Stay for me." His eyes softened, full of love and sorrow. "If I stay, you'll never live. You'll spend your life loving a ghost. And you deserve more than that." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "You're wrong. You're everything." Daniel reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek with a tenderness that nearly broke me. "And that's exactly why I have to let you go." But he didn't leave. Not yet. For days, we lived as if nothing had changed. We walked through the town, talked about futures that could never exist, held each other in the fragile spaces between dreams and reality. But the truth hung between us, unspoken but inescapable. He was fading, and soon I would have to decide. Set him free, or let him drag me into the same half-life he was trapped in. And as much as I wanted to deny it, I knew the choice would come. Soon. The nights grew colder. The leaves that once painted the sidewalks with gold and rust now rotted into brown fragments, swept up by the unforgiving wind. The small town where I lived seemed emptier than ever. Shops closing early, streets vacant by sundown, neighbors retreating into their homes as if the air itself carried secrets too heavy to breathe. Daniel liked the autumn, though. He said it reminded him of beginnings, of football games and first loves, of nights where the world felt alive even when it was breaking. But as much as he tried to hide it, I could see how much effort it took for him to keep his form solid in front of me. Every time he flickered, a jolt of panic shot through me. "You're fading," I told him one night as we sat on the hood of my old car, parked at the edge of town where the cornfields stretched endlessly into darkness. He didn't answer right away. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, where the sun had bled out into a sky bruised with purple and gray. "Maybe I'm just tired," he said eventually. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. The fear in my chest spilled over into anger, because it was easier to be furious than afraid. "Don't you dare lie to me, Daniel." He turned to me then, and his expression was softer than I expected. "I'm trying to give you time," he said. "But time isn't something I have anymore." I wanted to tell him I didn't care, that I would rather have him for one fleeting heartbeat than live 100 years without him. But the words caught in my throat, because I could feel the truth pressing down on me like gravity. Daniel wasn't meant to stay. It was around this time that my father stopped speaking to me altogether. After the night he'd seen Daniel, he avoided me as if I were contagious. My mother's silence grew heavier too, her glances sharp and quick, as though she were afraid of what she might see if she looked too long. I buried myself in Daniel because he was the only place where I still felt seen. We'd sit in the library at midnight, the air stale with dust and forgotten knowledge. He'd drift through the shelves like he belonged there, tracing titles of books that hadn't been opened in decades. Sometimes he would read to me, his voice steady and rich, wrapping itself around the words until they became something alive again. One night, he read me a poem by Walt Whitman, his favorite lines from Leaves of Grass. His voice trembled as he recited it, as if the words carried a weight only he could feel. When he finished, I asked, "Did you ever read that to him? The boy you loved?" Daniel closed the book gently, his fingers lingering on the worn cover. "No," he said. "Back then, words like these were too dangerous. I kept them inside, where they rotted." I reached for his hand, not caring that mine passed halfway through his before finding a fragile hold. "You don't have to hide anymore." For a moment, he let himself lean into me, his forehead brushing mine. "And you don't have to be alone." The silence between us was louder than any confession. But silence has a way of turning on you. The nightmares started not long after. I would wake in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, my chest heaving, the echo of screams I couldn't place ringing in my ears. Sometimes I swore I heard gunshots. Sometimes I saw Daniel's face twisted in pain, his hands stained with something dark. When I told him about the dreams, he looked away. His jaw tightened. Some truths are better left buried. I grabbed his arm, desperate. "You can't keep shutting me out. If we're going to do this, if we're going to love each other, you have to trust me." His eyes burned with sorrow, with a grief so old it felt endless. "Trust isn't the problem. Protecting you is." "Protecting me from what?" He didn't answer, and that silence was worse than any lie. Days passed and Daniel grew weaker. Sometimes, I could barely hear his voice, like he was speaking from underwater. Other times, he disappeared altogether, leaving me clutching the diary like a lifeline. I tried everything, staying awake for nights on end, begging him to come back, even spilling drops of my own blood on the diary pages as if sacrifice could bind him to me. Nothing worked. Until one night he returned, and this time he wasn't alone. I woke to the sound of footsteps in my room. At first, I thought it was my father, that he'd come to tear the diary from me once and for all. But when I opened my eyes, I saw Daniel standing in the corner. and next to him was another figure, taller, broader, with a shadowed face I couldn't make out. My blood ran cold. "Who is that?" I whispered. Daniel's expression twisted with something between fear and guilt. "No one," he said quickly. "Go back to sleep." But the other figure stepped forward, and for the first time since I'd met Daniel, I saw him afraid. Truly afraid. I sat up, heart hammering. "Daniel!" The figure vanished before I could finish. The air grew still, the silence thick enough to choke on. "What the hell was that?" I demanded. Daniel's shoulders sagged. He looked at me with eyes that carried decades of torment. "The past," he said simply. And then he disappeared too, leaving me alone in the dark with a fear I couldn't name. From that night forward, the shadows followed me. At school, I felt eyes on me in the hallways, even when no one was there. At home, I heard whispers through the vents, low and sharp, words I couldn't quite catch. At night, I dreamed of a boy bleeding out in the dirt, Daniel's hands trembling as he tried to stop the flow. I wanted answers. I wanted the truth. But every time I asked, Daniel turned away, his form flickering like a flame on the verge of burning out. Finally, one night I snapped. "You can't keep doing this to me," I shouted, slamming the diary shut. "If you love me, you have to tell me what happened. All of it. Or I'll burn this book and set you free myself." For a long moment, there was nothing. I thought maybe I'd lost him for good. Then slowly he appeared. His eyes were hollow, his voice ragged. "You want the truth? Fine. I'll give it to you. But once you know, there's no going back." My hands shook, but I nodded. "Tell me." Daniel closed his eyes, as if bracing himself against a storm. When he opened them, they were filled with tears that couldn't fall. "The boy I loved, his name was Michael. We were everything to each other. And then one night his father caught us. He dragged Michael out behind the barn, and I tried to stop him. His voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw the ghost of blood staining his hands. "I killed him," Daniel whispered. "I killed Michael's father. And in the chaos, he ran. He left me. He told everyone I attacked him. That I was sick. That I deserved to die." The words slammed into me like a fist. "I was beaten," Daniel continued, his voice barely audible, "dragged into the woods, left to bleed out under the stars. And no one came for me. No one." Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. "That's the truth," Daniel said finally, his eyes burning into mine. "That's why I can't move on. That's why I'm still here. Because love destroyed me. And now, I'm destroying you." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The boy I loved, the ghost who had become my only salvation, was carrying a past drenched in blood and betrayal. And yet, when he reached for me, trembling, desperate, I didn't pull away. Because I knew what it was like to love someone who ruined you. And I wasn't ready to let him go. That night, as I lay awake with Daniel's presence flickering beside me, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a love story. It was a haunting. And I wasn't sure anymore who was haunting who. The air in my room felt heavier after Daniel's confession. Even when he wasn't visible, the silence throbbed with the weight of his words, like the walls themselves had absorbed his grief. I couldn't unhear it. The image of him bleeding out under a sky that never cared, abandoned by the boy he loved, burrowed into me and refused to leave. But love is stubborn, and mine had already taken root. The next morning, the world looked ordinary. Kids walking to school, a neighbor mowing his lawn, the same cracked sidewalks leading downtown. And yet, nothing felt the same. Every step carried the echo of what Daniel had told me. At school, the whispers about me sharpened. I'd gotten used to being the weird one, the kid with no friends and too many shadows, but lately the whispers had teeth. Did you hear he talks to himself? No, he writes love notes to a ghost. Freak. I clenched my fists until my nails cut into my palms. Daniel's face flashed in my mind. His sorrow, his trembling hands, and I knew I couldn't tell anyone. If I did, I'd lose him. So I stayed quiet. That night, he came back. He always came back, no matter how much it hurt. I was sitting at my desk with the diary open, tracing the old, faded ink like it might reveal something new, when the air grew cold. The lamp flickered once, twice, and then he was there, fragile, translucent, but still Daniel. "Hi," he said softly, as if he didn't know whether I still wanted him. My chest tightened. "Hi." He hovered near the bed, uncertainty clouding his face. "I shouldn't have told you." "You should have," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. "I needed to know. Now you see what I am." His eyes dropped, shame pulling at the corners of his mouth. A monster. A boy who couldn't protect the person he loved. Who lost everything. Who... Stop. I stood, crossing the room until I was close enough to feel the chill of his presence. "You're not a monster. You're just human. Or you were. You made a choice in a moment of fear. Who wouldn't?" His gaze lifted to mine, wide and wet, though no tears fell. "You don't understand. That night ruined everything. It ruined me. Then let me help you carry it." My voice broke on the words, but I didn't care. "You don't have to be alone anymore." For a long time, he didn't answer. Then slowly he reached for me. His hand ghosted against my cheek, light as breath. And for the first time, I leaned into it without hesitation. Maybe I was the broken one. Maybe I was the fool. But in that moment, with his touch cold and fleeting against my skin, I knew I would rather burn with him than freeze alone. The days that followed blurred into a fragile rhythm. Daniel would appear at dusk, sometimes solid enough that I swore I could feel the warmth of his body when he leaned close. Other times, he was a flicker in the corner of the room, a shadow that barely held shape. He was slipping, and we both knew it. One evening, we drove out to the lake. Or rather, I drove, and he sat in the passenger seat, watching me with a quiet smile that made me ache. "Everything looks different from a car," he said, his hand pressed against the glass. "Back then, I never drove. Couldn't afford it. Michael used to talk about leaving town, about stealing his dad's truck and driving until the road disappeared. But we never did." His voice cracked. I glanced at him, wanting to pull him into my arms but knowing I couldn't. "We're here now," I said gently. "Maybe this can be our escape." At the lake, the water shimmered black under the stars. We sat on the hood of my car, shoulders almost touching, the silence between us thick with everything unspoken. "I wish I could kiss you," Daniel said suddenly. The words hit me like a punch. I turned to him, heart racing. "Then do it." His smile was small, pained. "You know I can't." "Then try," I whispered. He leaned closer, his face inches from mine, and for a heartbeat, I swore I felt the brush of his lips, cool, fleeting, but real enough to make me shiver. I closed my eyes, clinging to the moment, to the impossible miracle of loving someone who shouldn't exist. When I opened them, he was gone. The absences grew longer after that night. Sometimes, days would pass without a trace of him. I would sit with the diary open, begging the pages, but the silence mocked me. When he did return, he looked thinner, more transparent, as if the world were finally pulling him away. "I don't have much time," he admitted one night, his voice hollow. "The past is calling me back. And if I don't go, it'll take you too." "I don't care," I said fiercely. "Let it. I'd rather be with you than live in a world without you." He shook his head, anguish etched into every line of his face. Don't say that. Don't throw your life away for me. You still have a future. You are my future, I snapped. The words hung in the air, raw and desperate. For a moment I thought he might believe me. His eyes softened, his form flickering with a fragile glow. But then the glow dimmed, and he looked away. You'll hate me for it one day, he said quietly. If I let you stay, you'll hate me for taking everything from you. I wanted to argue, to scream, to tell him I could never hate him. But deep down, a part of me knew he was right. And that was the cruelest part of loving a ghost. Then the shadows came back. It started with the whispers. At first, faint, like voices carried by wind through cracks in the walls. Then louder, sharper, cutting into my nights. I'd wake with words echoing in my ears. Traitor, sinner, murderer. One night I saw him again, the figure who had appeared beside Daniel before. This time he stood at the foot of my bed, his face finally clear. Michael. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale, his expression twisted with rage. You stole him, Michael hissed. His voice was jagged, unnatural, like broken glass. You took him from me. I froze, my throat dry. No, he came to me. I didn't. You'll pay, Michael spat. Just like I did. The room plunged into darkness. When I opened my eyes again, he was gone. But Daniel was standing in the corner, his expression stricken. You saw him, Daniel whispered. I nodded, trembling. It was him, wasn't it? Michael. Daniel's voice cracked. He won't let me go. He never has. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Daniel wasn't just bound by grief. He was bound by the boy who betrayed him, the boy who still haunted him. And now Michael was haunting me too. I don't know how long I sat there after Daniel vanished, clutching the diary with shaking hands. My mind screamed for answers, for a way to fight back. But all I felt was fear. Because I finally understood. This wasn't just love. This wasn't just loss. This was a war between the living and the dead. And somehow I was trapped in the middle. The night settled around them, softer than it had been in months, like the sky itself had exhaled. A hush lingered across the fields as Nathan and Eli stood side by side on the porch, shoulders brushing, breaths visible in the cool air. Nathan had never believed in happy endings, at least not for himself. But standing here with Eli alive in his arms, no longer just ink on paper, no longer a ghost bound to an old diary, he felt the edges of his disbelief crumble. I don't know how this works, Nathan admitted, voice breaking as his hand found Eli's. I don't know if you'll fade tomorrow, or if time will tear us apart again. But I do know this. He turned, looking directly into Eli's eyes, those eyes that had once only existed in his dreams. I'm not afraid anymore. Not if it means I had you. Eli's smile was fragile at first, but then it blossomed, radiant and warm, like a dawn Nathan thought he'd never see. You summoned me with your grief, Eli whispered, but you kept me with your love. Nathan laughed softly, almost incredulously, because it was true. Every aching night spent reading that diary, every tear, every word scribbled into margins had not just resurrected Eli's ghost. It had tethered their souls. Behind them, the old farmhouse creaked, a witness to secrets too heavy for walls to bear. The town, the gossip, the harsh judgment of strangers. They all seemed so far away now. What remained was the quiet certainty that love, even born of tragedy, could defy the rules written by the world. They sat down together, their hands never parting. Nathan leaned his head on Eli's shoulder, breathing in the faint, impossible warmth of him. Eli's voice drifted low, steady as a heartbeat. Do you remember what you wrote that night, when you thought you'd never make it through? Nathan closed his eyes. He remembered every word. I wrote that if love is truly eternal, then maybe it doesn't care about the laws of time or death. Maybe it just waits, patiently, for us to find it again. Eli's hand tightened around his. Then you were right. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was alive with all the things they didn't need to say. Nathan thought of his father, of the town, of the heavy years of shame and fear, and for the first time none of it mattered. Because Eli was here. Because love had returned to him when he thought it impossible. The stars blinked awake above them, and Nathan realized that he was no longer haunted. Not by grief, not by the diary, not by the ghost of who he thought he had to be. He was simply in love. And that was enough. The world outside their small corner of America would keep spinning, cruel and complicated as always. But for Nathan and Eli, tonight was proof that love, real, raw, imperfect love, was the bravest thing a person could hold on to. No matter how it came to them. No matter the rules it broke. And in that moment, sitting side by side with the ghost who had become his heart, Nathan finally felt at peace. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.